Okay, so first and foremost, welcome, welcome, welcome. Dr. Dr. Popescu Sandu, not Dr. Honus Krebsaw, who's with us, asked me to share this link with you if you're not already connected to our LinkedIn group, the English majors. I'm putting it in the chat if you guys wouldn't mind joining us. We're trying to get track of all of our alums, and we're doing this through LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn, I just joined today for the first time, and it was very weird. So it's there. But thank you to those of you who were able to come. And we have three amazing alum panelists for you today, and also Dr. O'Neill, who's going to talk to us. What I'd like to do is Dr. O'Neill actually is going to go first. And then I thought we would go sort of in order of seniority, I guess. So we go with Amber, Vanessa, then Maddie. Since you all three have various different experiences and have been teaching at various different times. I'm sorry, I'm Amy Muntz. For those of you who don't know me, I work with the English teaching majors. I teach 444 and I share 344, which is young adult, with Dr. Soderberg. And I had the privilege of teaching everyone in this room. So like with the exception of Dr. O'Neill and Dr. Honus Krebsaw. So I love teaching
this plenty, Amy.
Huh?
You teach me plenty.
I do love teaching 444. I love working with our English teaching majors. So I just want to thank Maddie, Vanessa, and Amber. I know Amber, you're in a completely different time zone too. So thank you for making time to come and talk to us. I'm going to let Dr. O'Neill take it away. And then Amber, Vanessa, and Maddie, you guys can help us out. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Amy. So yeah, I'm going to share an experience from back when I started teaching. And this is, a long, long time ago. So I had to kind of, think back to the details. So if I seem a little disorganized, I might be just trying to remember exactly what happened. So this is an experience where I should have known better, right? So I wish I would have known better and made a better decision. And so kind of hopefully knowing about this could be useful for some of you. So yeah, this is my first year teaching. I was at a high school, a small public high school in upstate New York. And this was the beginning of the year, so September. And a student approached me about advising the student newspaper. And the student newspaper had been defunct at the school for a while, so it require, bringing it back, getting the infrastructure set up again. So I should have said no. A few reasons I should have said no to this request. I was a first year teacher and I had no time for a big responsibility like advising a school newspaper. And I didn't know the community that well. I was not from this small town community. I didn't know the culture of the school, the culture of the community, and being involved with the press in the community is probably not a good idea unless you know the community. But of course, I said yes because I didn't want to say no. And I was young and ambitious, and I wanted to make my mark on the school as I was coming into it. And it came with a small stipend, and money was tight. It's my first year of teaching, so I wanted that money. If I were to calculate how much the pay was, it was probably like $2 or $3 an hour. When you figure in all the time, yeah, that's advising any club is not a lucrative thing, but it sounded good at the time. So anyway, I got started with this. I had to find students, find funding sources to get it running, local ads. And, I did find out there are websites you can go to, and there are just people who want to pay you money to get ads in student newspapers. Like the military is a big one. They're looking for student newspapers where they can advertise. And this is far enough back in time that making a print newspaper was important. I mean, we could have done a website, but then print was still the main source for news consumption, and it added a little more prestige if we could get it printed. So we had to find a printer, figure out how we could pay them and so forth. And then I also had to seek permission from the school board. So I had to go to a school board meeting and talk about what our plans were. At the time, you got an enthusiastic response. They were very positive. They wanted to see the student newspaper come back. The only condition was that The superintendent wanted the privilege of reviewing the copy before we actually printed it. So maybe some of you are already getting an idea where the story is going. But it seemed at the time, it seemed great. I was happy. Like it seemed like the school board liked me, the administrators liked me because I was doing this extra thing. So I felt pretty positive. So the first issue comes around. We had lots of articles, and it was typical stuff for a student newspaper, like sports articles, comedy. Somebody drew a cartoon. There were reviews, fiction, even, and some opinion pieces. And one particular opinion piece was about banned books. So it was banned book week when we were putting our first issue out, and so it was an anti-censorship article, and from my naive perspective, it seemed completely innocuous. It's just a student talking about freedom of speech, freedom of press, importance of being exposed to different ideas. There's nothing inflammatory in it. It's pretty standard stuff, I thought, for a student opinion piece. But there was one paragraph in the article that referenced a local controversy where the school board had ruled against a particular book being allowed in that school library. And I didn't give enough attention to that. It still seemed innocuous. Like, who's going to care that, a high school sophomore is complaining about one decision that the school made about a book in the library? What harm could there be? Like adolescents, in my opinion, students are learning to challenge authority, and this is just the practice of it. And, why would the school board care if one student didn't like their decision? Ha ha ha. In my notes, I wrote ha 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 there. So once I sent the issue to the superintendent, I immediately got a call. So this is like the afternoon, like school's over, it's just the club is finishing this up. We hope that we're going to send it to press like immediately after this. So I have to go down to his office, and he was not happy about that article. So he could tell he didn't want it printed, and I understand now that of course he was just worried about his own job, because the superintendent serves at the pleasure of the school board, and so he thought, oh, there's something critical of the school board. We can't have this in here. And we talked about it a bit, and then he wanted to come up with what he thought was a compromise, which was that the administration would be allowed to put their own article in, so that you'd have like both sides of the story in the paper. And I didn't like that. The students in the newspaper club didn't like that, because it's supposed to be a student newspaper. Like, if administration could just publish whatever they want in there, then suddenly we're just the mouthpiece of the school. Another side of this, he even called in the author, the student, into his office to talk with her. And this is part of it that really pissed me off, because like when she came out of the office, she was just in tears. Like, I don't know what exactly was said in there, but like she was just torn apart by this. So it looked like this was going to become like a really long, protracted battle. And we had put all this work into getting the first issue ready, and we just really wanted to get it to press. And so we ended up deciding we're just going to take that article out for the time being and print, what we have. So the story doesn't end there, because then guess what happens with that article? So this student, she was very passionate about, being able to express her opinion. And so she went to the local press, like not the school press, but the local small town press. And she got her article printed there with an explanation of what happened. So this thing really blew up. And so the superintendent worried about just this tiny little bit of negative publicity in a student paper that probably no one's going to read anyway, except, or at least not care that much about, becomes like this small town controversy that everyone in the community can read about. So a lot of people made bad decisions. I think superintendent made a bad decision. I don't think he should have been so concerned. But I also learned some lessons from this and things I think that beginning teachers should know. One, don't get involved with the school newspaper when you're just starting out. And I don't know if any of our teachers in here have done that, but if so, I'd love to hear experiences. I also should have thought more carefully about issues of censorship and how sensitive school administrators could be. So I was very naive about that kind of thing. Later, I attended a high school Journalism Institute. And, I should have done the institute first to learn about high school journalism before actually advising the club. And I should have learned more about the incident that was described in that student's article. And I probably should have worked more closely with the student to make sure that she interviewed more people and fleshed it out a little bit more. But my philosophy was that it really is a student newspaper, and I didn't want to get that involved. So that was not a great way to start my new job. So I felt like I had been like the darling of the school board and the administration, and now suddenly I'm like a troublemaker who they're going to watch really carefully. And it was way more stress than I needed. Just, anybody who's taught, that first semester is stressful enough anyway. So that was not a good idea. So the moral of my story is look before you leap when it comes to stuff like that.
Thank you, Dr. O'Neill. It's amazing how many of these kinds of stories we start collecting as we're teaching, and the don't do as I do. And we have in 444, we have open question days where they can ask me anything they want. And they get to hear my horror stories, which I will keep to myself unless you're in the class. So, but next we're going to hear from Amber Seibert, who is a graduate of our fine university. And Amber, if you can tell us just a little bit about you before you start talking about where you're teaching, where you're living, what's going on.
Absolutely. It is bizarre to hear that I am the veteran of this panel. So it feels like both yesterday and a lifetime that I was there, which is really my teaching journey timeline. And you're all very lucky because Dr. Muntz and Dr. Honus-Krebsaw are the only reasons that I'm a college graduate. So I am very grateful to both of them to this day. My name's Amber Seibert. This is my 6th year of teaching. And right after graduating from USI, I substitute taught for a little bit in Evansville before moving to the Indianapolis area, which having been born and raised in Evansville, it was kind of a shock because, Evansville Vanderburgh School Corporation is not typical of every other school district in the state. So that was a learning curve. And now I live and teach in Indianapolis, the metro area. And what else was I supposed to tell them?
What grade are you teaching, and what are you teaching? You said you're about to start your Gothic unit. Tell us a little bit about.
So I have since graduation taught every secondary grade except 6th and 9th graders, and that is extremely intentional. That is not my wheelhouse. I taught 8th grade for the past 4 years because when I student taught, I went into it thinking I only want to teach like AP level seniors, little junior adults. Student taught 7th grade, fell in love with it. It takes, I'm told, a very special person to teach middle school. So I guess that is somewhat of an honor. I think it just means you are just as crazy as they are, so you can adapt and survive. So I did that for a while, and then knew it was time for something new. So I moved from the north side of Indianapolis to the south side, where I now teach 11th and 12th grade English. So it's very cool. This is my 2nd year in this district. So I get to loop with my students from 11th to 12th grade, which is, a mixed bag, but it's nice because we become built in with that relationship already, whereas normally it takes a while for them to know if I'm joking or being serious. Whereas my 12th graders this year already know that I'm most likely being sarcastic. So I am involved with our teachers union. That is something that Dr. Muntz asked me to talk about because that is kind of the avenue that I've taken in terms of teaching and education interests. And I joined because when I student taught, my supervising teacher said, "You want to do this when you become a teacher." I was like, okay, great, I will do that. And then we had our first building representative meeting, my first year of teaching. And I was like, oh, wow, all of this is why I wanted to be a teacher. All these principles that I believe in, to be a voice for my students, to be the best professional that I can be, to advocate on behalf of my students and myself. And to advance racial and social justice and equity. It was just, the stars aligned. And I thought, yes, this is the right avenue for me. I somehow missed that there was a student group at USI of aspiring educators. I don't know how I missed it, but I didn't join that. So I came late to the party. And I'm very grateful that I did, because in all earnestness, I promise I have a degree from USI in English. I would not still be teaching if not for our teachers union. And that is just because truly the good always outweighs the bad in terms of like horror stories and then stories where you're like, wow, that is going to make me cry. But in the event of those horror stories, my union has really pulled me back in and, giving me that refresher of like, this is why you want to teach and someone to have your back. It can be very lonely sometimes. Even I've been fortunate enough to have awesome colleagues at every school I've been at. But at the end of the day, often you're the only grown up in the room. Grown up. I have 18-year-old students. I'm like, you're a baby. So it can be isolating and you think, I'm the only one who feels this way. And it's only my building or my district or my state. And so it helps broaden that horizon and helps you, connect and realize, oh, I'm not alone. This is like, if I weren't connected to teachers throughout the state and the country, I wouldn't know everyone's students are bananas this year, right? And it would be very isolating. So I've done a lot of work in that, involved at all the levels. I am a member of ISTA, Indiana State Teachers Association, which my district feeds into that, which feeds into the national umbrella of the National Education Association. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved. And as Dr. O'Neill was saying, this is great because it's a way to be involved that does not involve risk. If you're like, I want to do something, but I don't want to be held responsible for minors after work, this is a great thing for you to do. And like you said, I was laughing during your story, Dr. O'Neill, because I very much identify with that student. I really like my union because I am also someone who likes to challenge authority. And I want to know what the rules are to the letter so that I can like find the loophole. So I'm like, it's very important to know the rules so that you can properly break them. Not really break. Don't take that out of this recording. But just to say, okay, well, I can move within these boundaries. So aside from those personal anecdotes, reasons that you should join. This is not a canned pitch. This is from my brain. Number one, any professional has a professional organization. Hopefully your doctor is part of one. Your superintendents and principals will be part of their professional organization. And this means, you're in an organization with other professionals. This is yours as the teachers union. There are other organizations that will happily take your money and tell you what you want. But this is, very democratic. In teaching, you can't learn everything in college. For 4 years, that's a lot of learning. It's a lot of on the job. It's a lot of learning to swim after you've been put in the pool. And what's really great about ISTA specifically is when you don't learn everything, you can learn it. If you take the initiative, ISTA has free conferences. When you get your teaching license, you have to get so many, professional points you're continuously learning like your doctors do. You wouldn't want them still doing the same, using leeches. There's new techniques. So they have conferences that are free. And what's really great about the professional development is that it's from actual classroom teachers. When you become a teacher, you will learn very quickly that the people with the biggest opinions about how to teach are typically those who are not in the classroom. That's because it's very easy to have thoughts about something you don't know about. And specifically for you, I am going to be blunt and say, if these people who will say, I'll take hundreds and thousands of dollars from you to come to this conference and just listen to a suit speak. It's a scam because they've either had no classroom experience or they've been out of the classroom for too long. You might have been a great teacher in 2005. It's a whole new ball game. And also the balls are on fire and it's underwater somehow and no life jackets. Like, it is ever changing. And the only people who can really help you are the other people who are in the water with you. I would say the most important reason, like, it's your insurance. This is, can you drive a car without insurance? Yes. Is that a stupid thing to do? Yes. Don't do stupid things. So it also doesn't work retroactively. So let's say Dr. O'Neill got into that kerfuffle over the school newspaper. He could not then come to me as his building representative for the union and say, hello, I need union representation. Where do I sign? I unfortunately have to say, it doesn't work that way. If you'd signed up just the day before, you would have been covered. So, right, like, you can't go purchase insurance afterwards. And this is a worst case scenario escape lever, typically. I have never had to have union representation. Thankfully, I've had good admin who know that I know the rules, so they don't ever try anything. But, it's just someone who's in your corner. And unfortunately, once you leave college and you're in the classroom, there's not a lot of people in your corner, you come to find out. There's people who work in offices, parents who want the best for their students. But at the end of the day, these are people who represent you and have your back until the administrators know that breaks the law, because they're not obligated to tell you, right? Like, last year in my building, they, in Indiana, legally required to give teachers a 30-minute duty-free lunch. They tried to take that away, and we thought, we have to tell you, you can't do that, or else our teachers union will file a lawsuit and we will win, because you can Google it, it's in the law. So that was just an example of a time where it was quick. Our union president was like, absolutely not, that will not happen. But again, it's a lot of legal things in education. And these are people you can go to without judgment for help, for representation, to learn more about being a teacher. I truly would have left the profession a long time ago if I did not have people in my corner the way they are. And I do a lot of work in ISTA for early career educators, emerging educators, aspiring, whatever they're called in this time. So I really passionate about this work. And if you ever need anything, I can put my email in the chat. I would love to answer your questions. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Amber. We had a former student who actually came and talked to my 444 about an instance that happened to them, and unfortunately did not have union rep because had not yet gotten the money to buy union dues. They were waiting for their first paycheck, and so sort of stressed the importance of the union and representation. So next we have Vanessa Roach. Vanessa, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Vanessa Roach. I live in Evansville and I teach not in EVSC, but at Gibson Southern High School. So it's a pretty small district, pretty rural. So this is my 4th year teaching. I started out at USI, of course, finished my degree. I'm getting my master's in English as well. So clearly I didn't have enough of USI, so I needed a little bit more. So my experience, it has been pretty good. My student teaching experience was atrocious. It was terrible. My mentor and I did not get along well. There was many days I would just like cry in my car, coming home, listening to sad songs. But once I got out of student teaching, I absolutely loved the classroom experience, having my own classroom. Now, my experience is maybe a little bit different. So I minored in special education. So the kids that I teach, I have 3 periods of self-contained with mild learning disabilities. And then I also have 3 periods of inclusion. So I have 6 different preps. So that was a lot my very first year. But most of my kids are absolutely wonderful. I'm kind of known the teacher around my school that if you've got a kid with a behavioral problem or a kid that won't do work or a kid that can't pass class, they kind of stick them in my class and usually. So I, as one of my former principals mentioned, and I did not like how they said this, that it's my class is a good class for the lazy kids, which, yeah, not always true. A lot of my kids are hardworking. They just learn differently. Many of my kids just cannot sit in a chair for 55 minutes and be expected to learn like everybody else. And of course, that's not a bad thing or anything like that. So I teach 9th through 12th. I have 2 elective classes, recovery English, and then of course my self-contained classes. I did my student teaching in 8th grade. I like the age group, definitely would not want to go any younger, even though many of my freshmen act like right now 6th, 7th graders. So there's really no difference between freshmen and middle school for a lot of them. So I think the biggest thing that I really kind of wish someone had been there to tell me my first year was to not overwork yourself, like take care of you first. If you are strung out, if you can't sleep or eat, or I mean, there's days I maybe got 5 hours of sleep the entire week. And I was running on coffee and energy drinks and random pieces of candy that I would find in my drawer. But I thought, you know, I had to do everything. So anything that my building principal asked me to do, homebound kids, I was having 3 or 4 homebound kids. I had, you know, like classes I was teaching online as my side gig because I wanted, you know, to have a supplementary income. And anything my teachers asked or other teachers asked in my building, I felt like I couldn't say no. And I think it's very important early on that you do learn to say no. Like you're not going to get fired for saying no as long as you are doing like what you've signed your contract for. And it was, you know, me as a perfectionist, a very type A person, it was very difficult for me to learn how to do that. And, you know, your first year is very overwhelming. For my situation, the teacher that came before me literally left nothing. We had no curriculum that I had to follow, so nothing was laid out. It was pretty much like, here's some money, create a curriculum. Oh, and I was hired in like 3 weeks before school started. So it was a whirlwind, you know, from the get-go. My first principal was not the most accommodating. He did later end up getting fired for personal reasons, but the principal I have now is, I could not imagine a better one. So he's very supportive. Also, my first year, I was only observed once. And the whole time I had my observers in the classroom, they were watching a cooking video. So I really got no feedback. They never assigned like a mentor teacher with me or anything like that. So it was very isolating. I know Amber was talking about that, and I totally feel that because my classroom, even today, is still kind of segmented away from the other English teachers. So I have to go up 2 flights of stairs in order to talk to anybody that teaches my content. Because I teach technically the special education English. So very isolating. My first year I was working crazy hours. There's nights I slept at school because I was there till like midnight, and I just thought, well, it's a 45-minute drive home. Might as well, I can get more sleep this way. So after, you know, my first year, I think the second year was the year that, you know, I really found my grounding. And I think, you know, your first year, if you can get through that, it's like riding a bicycle while the bicycle's on fire. If you can make it through your first year, everything I think is a little bit more smooth sailing. And then of course COVID hit. But I know a lot of people had different experiences with COVID. Mine was not really that bad. Like we had great administration. There wasn't, you know, obviously with kids being out and things like that, that was stressful. But it was actually, I think, as good as it could have went. So I'm very thankful for that. I'm really in a good place right now. I'm managing grad school, a side gig, teaching job. I teach online via OutSchool in the evenings, and I maybe take work home maybe once a week, if that. The spring has, IEP season. I have to do IEPs, and I have 80 of them on my caseload. So that gets a little stressful, but for the most part, I feel like I am managing and can have a work-life balance. My first year, I was like, there is no way I'm ever going to be able to have a family, to take care of kids, to like do anything. Like, this job has like consumed my identity. And I feel like, if the second year had been the way my first year had been, I would have found maybe a different profession, but it does get better. So do remember that, one day at a time. Also, don't, like, you have personal days for a reason. If you need a mental health day, if you're on the verge of breaking down, if you need a day to catch up on grading, that's why they're there for. There's many times that I wasn't technically sick or anything, but I just, like, I've got so much work to do, or, I just am not in a good place right now. So do take those days. You don't get any kind of award for being at school every single day of the year. It's not like attendance awards in elementary school. Yep, and your brain can definitely be sick. So that's kind of my experience. Of course, I've had, really bad days. I've had kids vape in class. I've had kids, I walked into the bathroom, the student once I walked in, she was attempting to cut herself. So I've, had a lot of traumatic things happen that college can never prepare you for. You can learn, I think in the books that you read in college, you have the ideal student, and none of the students that you meet in real life are that ideal student. And that's not a bad thing. Like, my students have so much personality. My freshmen, like, they're like little squirrels running around. They're so chatty, so sweet. So for every bad day, there's plenty of good days that do follow that. And that's kind of what keeps you going. So I honestly, at this point, I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Thank you, Vanessa. One of the things we actually talked about just recently in 444 was that teaching is a profession that eats its young, right? That it'll take up exactly as much time as you allow it to take up, and that you have to have like personal time. And so, we kind of talked about like the things that are yours, right? Like, if it's going to a movie with your partner or doing yoga or something, like, you've got to have that thing that's yours, and you've got to be able to like take your hat off when you walk in the room at home, right? I remember I had a real problem with work-life balance my first year when I taught high school, and apparently was having a very rocky relationship with my now partner. And I didn't know it. Like, we were having problems, and I had no idea we were having problems. So, so that was eye-opening for me. So yeah, like, take care of yourself. Learn to say no. Dr. O'Neill is absolutely right. Vanessa is absolutely right. You don't get an award for being a yes person, and just know your limits, right? Like, know what you can do. And I should also say, Vanessa is also a very generous dog sitter, as Amber once was. And so I fully use my former students to help me out with dog sitting. But and Vanessa's like, what was it, like an hour to get to school from my house or something? And Vanessa very kindly.
It's not that bad. It's not that much longer than it is from my apartment, 30 to 45 minutes. And I usually speed, so less.
You were very amazing. So, well, now we're going to have Maddie. Maddie is our most recent graduate from 2019. And Maddie is also in our master's program. And I put a note in the chat. If you are interested in a master's degree, we do have a program that's all online now at USI. And Dr. Conaway is the director of the MAE. So if you wanted to talk to him, he will be happy to tell you further information. So Maddie, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie Ozenbaugh. I graduated from the program in December of 2019. And I don't know, I know Kristen. Kristen's our awesome student teacher in our department here at Princeton, and she's also a December grad. So December grads are kind of interesting because you're at this point where you're like, am I going to sub? Am I going to have a job? What am I going to do in the spring? And I got lucky at Princeton Community High School. So if you don't know, Princeton's a little bit north of Evansville. It takes me about 35 minutes to get here most of the time. But if you get a job opportunity while you are student teaching, I highly recommend applying for any and everything, and interviewing as much as you can. Oftentimes they tell you don't take the first job that you get or receive, the first offer, and it's been the best fit for me. So this is my 3rd year here. I started in January of 20. So my first actual semester, we only had about 8 weeks before we went virtual. So I've never taught in a normal setting. I've never had a normal school year. Everything's been related to COVID, which has been super interesting. But I think it'll actually be kind of difficult to go back to normal because I won't know what normal is like. And I've made it this far with COVID. So I think this is my profession that I'm going to stick with. If you, like Vanessa said, if you can make it through the first year, everything else is smooth sailing. You'll have a really good understanding of what you're doing. You'll have a better understanding of where you want to go with your curriculum. You'll have some things already planned. So it does get better. Student teaching also can be super overwhelming. Is anyone student teaching this semester other than Kristen? Yeah, Kristen, you're probably feeling a little overwhelmed at times, but it does matter. The clientele in each class is completely different. So one class can go really well and one class can be the polar opposite. It could go south really quickly, but just hang in there. I made a few notes of things that I thought were something I would just talk about, things that you might not learn in college that you'll definitely encounter and you might not know how to react to. So just my personal experiences. Your first parent email, they're not always good. I've been really lucky, actually. Like, I'm really knocking on wood because I despise parent emails, especially the bad ones. If you stay in contact with teachers with parents and you let them know praise for students as well as students who are really struggling and you keep in contact, things are typically fine. You make that good relationship with both the student and the family, but you will probably get a hateful parent email at some point. It's inevitable. It's something that you'll encounter. My best advice is to not read it and be discouraged. Don't read it and react really quickly. So don't respond. Maybe take a step back, talk to your department head. Administration is always great. The one that I had last year scared me and it was at night. And then I was like, I'm not going to sleep all night because of this. I just sent it to my principal and we got it worked out in the morning and everything ended up being fine. So your first parent email, and not even your first, but most parent emails that you'll get that are not so positive in nature can be really scary. But my advice would be just ask a colleague that you trust in your department, ask your administration, and don't let that kind of discourage you because they can be a little discouraging. Some other things, IEP and 504 plans. We don't really know much about those until we graduate and we're in the real world. So Kristen, you probably have talked with Mrs. Velthouse about these in student teaching, but following the student accommodation plans and just coming up with some tactics to stay organized for those. We don't really learn much about those in college or in the education program. That wouldn't be really something we talk about in English, but in the education program, we don't know much about them. And you have to follow them legally. And kind of going off what Amber was saying about the union, joining the union is a great opportunity for you because sometimes accommodations can be forgotten or maybe you just didn't realize you were upholding the accommodations as well as you could and things could go bad really quickly with that. So that would be probably something more to talk about with your education professors, but just kind of realizing that if you're going into this profession, you do have to kind of have some sense of organization. And just being aware of like those smaller things. So those are my 2 big ones. My last big piece of advice, this is something I've learned in my 3rd year. You can't come off you have to like ride this fine line of being an authoritarian and also being someone that they're not looking at like you are kind of like a hard ass. So you don't want to walk in the room and be the tough guy. You kind of have to read their language, still within following rules, but just go into it. Any practicums that you have, any student teaching that you do, just go into it with this idea that you need to kind of read the room, kind of feel out what it's like, who's in there, what the teacher is like, and then everything will flow smoothly. That's the way you're going to build the best relationships. You can't go in there thinking all you're going to talk about the whole class period is English related content. You've got to throw in those personal conversations. I am notorious for going on rants. They know like weird parts of my life story that they might not have asked for, but I think that that ultimately helps with relationships, and that's the most important things in the classroom. If you don't build those relationships, if they don't trust you, they're not gonna do well in your classroom. So I think it's really important to establish that before you even think about teaching them content. So those are mine. And then one other thing that I was thinking of, Vanessa talks about using those personal days, which I'm all on board for that. I use my personal days. They give them to you. They're there for you. But even on days when you don't take a personal day, there's going to be times when you are going to come into school and you're like, I have no clue what we're doing today, or I'm really not sure how this lesson is going to go, or if it doesn't go well, what am I going to do? Have some fun vocab games. Have some things just in your back pocket to use whenever I can read students and I'm like, they're so bored with this, they need to get up and move. Have some creative games, get some fly swatters, do a Kahoot. Just have that content specific language and vocab ready to go, because they really enjoy those games, and it's also just a nice brain break for you too. But those are some things that I've learned this year. You're learning something new every single day in all of your classes. I forgot to mention this. I teach 10th grade. So I teach the honors and the regular, and I did my my student teaching in 6th grade, and it was at my school of choice. It was in my grade of choice. It was great. I had a very, very pleasant student teaching experience, and I was convinced I was never going to teach anything but middle school. Definitely give your other option a chance, because I never would have imagined myself liking 10th grade, and now I don't want to leave 10th grade. I really like it. I like this age group. So definitely just go into everything with a positive attitude. And it is hard in this profession sometimes. It is. Especially, I don't have negative colleagues. I like to brag about my colleagues because I think I personally have the best department head ever. She's so funny, and always has ideas and things to offer me. But try to stay positive as much as things can get rough, because it really can in this profession. There's a lot of, sometimes there can be politics in school, with colleagues and just families that are more well known, I guess you can say. This more so happens in like a small town kind of feel, but there can be politics, and people can talk, but just stay positive and you'll make it through. I guarantee. So that's my spiel.
Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you.
These are absolutely wonderful pieces of advice. I feel so justified in 444 now for some of the things I said this semester. So thank you for making me feel like a good teacher. I appreciate that. So I know we have about 10 minutes. If anyone has any questions for our 3 or 4 panelists, if Dr. O'Neill too would be open to questions, just let me know if you have a question.
I have a question. So when is the best time to look for a union? And also, do you think it puts off employers if you're in a union?
I was going to do the teacher cliche. Excellent question, Alice. But it is one of those things that's like, no one writes these things down. So how am I supposed to learn it if no one tells me, which is very common in teaching, unfortunately. So when you are hired after you get your job, then in my experience, you always have, I don't know any other school that doesn't have a new teacher orientation. That would be a red flag. So your union will typically have a little time to give their spiel, do their membership push, part of that. So I know so they will ask you to join, hopefully, if they're any good at membership. And I, being so involved with it, I put it on my resume. And I forgot to say, you are all very lucky, because when I was at USI, it was very much, oh no, there's not enough jobs for teachers. And so the ball is in your court. So you are lucky enough to have the privilege of picking and choosing. So I would say if in your job interview, ask them. I've been on panels to interview administrators and we've asked them, what's your experience and opinion about teachers unions? Because that's going to tell you a lot about what the culture of the building is like, what your life is going to be like working there. And not all schools have a union. Like if you're a private or private charter, those teachers cannot unionize. So unfortunately, they are up a creek in many instances. And if hopefully no one reaches out to you, you can reach out to ISTA. You would make someone's day if you sought out the chance to join. But not every public school in Indiana is NEA affiliated. There's also AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, which is a little different, but they do the same thing, just different approaches and staff, basically.
I'm going to jump in on this one too. So the school where I worked that I described the story from, it was in New York, and their unions are very powerful, and had a great experience. And if I remember correctly, it was automatic membership in the union just when you get the job. But then I had a drastically different experience at a later job, which was at a charter school. And like Amber was mentioning, charter schools very often don't have unions. And I didn't fully appreciate how important the union was until I didn't have one, because then I realized the administration will really try to take advantage of teachers if the teachers don't have those protections. And there were even instances where some of the teachers had tried to organize and bring a union into the school, and the administration found ways to get those teachers fired, which is illegal, of course, but there are ways around it. So I would say if you're going into a school where, union membership is not a thing, like be very, very cautious about that and try to get more information about what the climate of that school is like.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question. Okay, about like getting hired and jobs, finding a job process. When you were student teaching, like when did you start to apply for jobs? Did you just hear about jobs in your school district, or did you seek out for jobs in other areas? And kind of how many interviews did you have? Just anything like that.
For me, so I student taught in the spring. So around March is when I think a lot of schools start like making job postings, some of them a little bit later. It just, depends what opens up. So I knew, I really didn't want to move out of the area just yet. Like, I had a solid relationship in the area, and I wanted, of course, to find a job in the area, and that's what I knew. So I didn't really seek out jobs outside of, the district area. So I did, apply a lot online. I had a lot of tutoring experiences. So a lot of people that I was tutoring, gave me ideas of where I was hiring and whatnot. So I did apply to EVSC. I had an, interview there. And then my only other interview because I applied to maybe 6 schools, and I think 2 of them called me back the same week. And so I had 2 interviews in 1 week, and they both offered me a job. And I decided I just really like the climate at the school I am now. So that was the job that I took. But I went in for an interview, and then not even 24 hours later, they offered me the job and everything. So it was a very quick process. I know they were kind of running down to the line because they thought they would have a teacher for the following year, and teacher just quit, I think, unexpectedly. So it worked out for me. I know at the beginning, I was kind of like, oh, if I don't get hired right then and here before, school year starts, then nobody will be hiring, for the following year. I think, when I was looking for a job, it was a lot more difficult to get a job, just with the whole climate. I don't think there's really any worry about that right now, with the way, school systems are looking for teachers, and a lot of teachers are leaving the workforce. I know just last year we had 5 or 6 teachers at our school just leave. We just hired an English teacher this past year. There's unfortunately a lot of new teachers don't, I think, stay in the profession very long. There's a high turnover rate, at least where I'm at. That's kind of my experience.
Yeah, I student taught in the fall, and I think Dr. O'Neill actually was the one. Our department head had sent out an email to like just USI, the English department, in search of like an immediate English teacher. So sometimes you can get it through USI, like people within the department will send out emails like, here's, some openings. Also just checking, like if you want to stay in the area, most districts use AppleTrack. And they have, like, if you look at the middle school or the high school, they'll have current listings and then when they need to be filled by. I applied for the job. I knew I wasn't graduating until December, and I applied for the job in October, and they hired me in October, knowing I wasn't going to come in until the next semester. So if you're on like track to graduate in the spring, they have so many openings throughout the summer. Like I know EVSC will hire up until like the day before the school year, just because that's happened to a friend. So even if you are like, you have to sub for a semester or you have to sub for a little bit, jobs open all year round. So you will find something at some point. And I agree. I think most of my like time in college, we heard that there was like not a teacher shortage, but the opposite. And it's actually now like we need teachers, like we will recruit you. So you will find a job for sure. And I know especially if you're from the area or you plan to stay in the area, there's always openings. Like I said, Princeton is a little north of Evansville. And we have some veteran teachers at the school, but we also have some new teachers coming in. So I think there's going to be a lot of turnover. And I know in districts alike, the same thing is happening. But just be on the lookout at all times because things do open up for you. And I think traditionally, most of the teaching interviews are just one interview. And they call you pretty quickly from what I've heard for most people, but don't ever be afraid to do like a follow-up call either. So if you haven't heard anything, it doesn't hurt to send, an email or to call the school just to kind of see the status of your application.
Yeah, I student taught in the fall and then actually took a maternity leave position at my old high school, and I found out about it because one of my USI classmates is having a baby, and she said, would you like to come take over my class? And I did, and it was an experience. So another way you can find jobs is this website that I put in the chat. This tells you like, we're looking for this kind of teacher, this grade level, full-time, part-time, district. This is a good tool if you're looking like, okay, I want to be around South Bend. Oh, this school's hiring. And it's also a great tool if you want to be nosy and see if your colleagues have resigned. Just a future tip. And again, yeah, troll the district websites. Indianapolis is weird because there's a lot of metropolitan school district. Like I'm in MSD Decatur. I was in MSD Washington Township. A lot of them, I think Madison said, share the same application system. I didn't even know my school district existed, either of them, until they called me for an interview. I was like, yes, I'm very passionate about your township mission. And this is my dream job. Like, I didn't know where it was. I had to look it up on Google Maps. And take those interviews because again, you will never know. I was like, I guess I'll interview for this place. I'm not going to work there. And they said, you will get to pick what you teach. And I was sold. And I would say just keep monitoring it and be persistent and ask for peer review on your resume and cover letter. It's tedious, but I tell my seniors, part of the job process is weeding out the people who will not get through the application process. So use the keywords, fill it out. It's like applying to college. It is time consuming and tedious, but at some point they want people who can do time consuming and tedious tasks, right? So you're going to fit the bill in some aspect just by completing it.
Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for coming and being amazing colleagues and alums and teachers out in the world. It makes me feel really good to see all your great success. So Dr. O'Neill, is there another, is this the last one for the semester, the last teaching panel for the semester? Or are we doing
No, we
one?
have one more. So Professor Moffat is going to do a workshop on teaching poetry. And that's going to be, I think, the first week of December.
Okay,
So yeah, there'll be an email that goes out pretty soon on that.
great. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, guys. Have a good day.